Hey, what's going on, Fight Family? Contemplate Boxing. Just want to contemplate on a few things. Do want to specifically talk about Gary Russell Jr. Of course, we all know Gary Russell Jr. had a good performance against Kiko Martinez, ended up stopping him. As we expected, Gary Russell Jr., very talented fighter, very skilled fighter, had a great amateur background, came into the professional ranks. A lot of high hopes for him. Unfortunately, he hasn't been able to secure a lot of the big fights that he really wanted. I know he wanted Carl Frampton for a while. He wanted Leo Santa Cruz. He still wants Leo Santa Cruz. Biggest fight that he was able to get thus far was against Vasily Lomachenko, and unfortunately he fell short in that particular fight. But was a good matchup. But Lomachenko showed that he was on a different level in comparison to Gary Russell Jr. Wasn't a blowout or anything, but a really good fight. But since then, not a whole lot has really happened for Gary Russell Jr. He was looking for an Abner Mares fight at one time, I believe, and that never really came to fruition. So, in some of his interviews leading up to the Leo Santa Cruz fight, he was questioned about why he only fights one time a year, because that has become a habitual practice for Gary Russell Jr. Gary Russell Jr., again, is considered to be a top fighter, but you rarely see him. Once a year just doesn't do it for most boxing fans. Well, his response to this was that he can't get any of the top guys to sign on the bottom line. This is true. You cannot force another fighter into a fight. This is just true. You can't force anybody to fight you. That's just whether you're talking about in the boxing ring, or even if you're trying to fight somebody on the street, which I don't recommend. Don't do that. But that's with any business transaction. You can't get another business to sign a contract to go into partnership with business with you, unless you're talking about corporate takeovers and whatnot. That's a whole different story. But in the world of boxing, you can't force somebody to sign the dotted line to fight you. That's true. I agree with Gary Russell Jr. 100% on that. Now, here's where my mind and Gary Russell Jr.'s minds do kind of diverge from one another. We have plenty of cases historically in which fighters were not able to get the fights that they really wanted, but what they did is they continued to stay active. If they couldn't get the champion, they fought the number one. If they couldn't get the number one, they fought the number two. If not the number two, then they went after the number three. They just went down the list of those rankings until they built themselves up into a position to where those champions didn't have any choice but to fight them. We saw this with Gennady Golovkin. When he collected almost all the belts, a lot of the champions that were holding titles at the time when he was coming up were not going to fight him. They refused to fight him. So he stayed busy. He was fighting 2-3 times a year, fighting whoever he could, knocking off whoever he could, building up the ladder. Errol Spence Jr., in order to get the title shot against Kell Brook, he fought one person after another, building his way up into a mandatory position, and even went over to Kell Brook's backyard to knock him out and take that title. Matter of fact, you want to go back a little bit further. Archie Moore spent years trying to get a fight against Joey Maxim, and he fought one person after the other, until he finally got that Joey Maxim fight, placing himself into position for that particular bout to fight and defeat Joey Maxim. Paul the Punisher Williams, very avoided fighter for a while, but he fought one person after the other, whoever he could get in the ring with him, before he finally got a big fight, which was the Margarito fight. Unfortunately, these are just things that, some fighters have to do. Some fighters just have a style that are going to make them very high risk and very low reward to a lot of opponents that are out there. And we see this as a common practice in boxing, where your top names are not going to fight those particular fighters until they are put into that position to where they either have to fight them, or until the financial reward is just too much to turn down. Gary Russell Jr. is probably going to have to take a look at the example of some of these other fighters that I mentioned, the Archie Moores, the Paul Williams, even Antonio Margarito. You know, of course, we know the whole plaster of Paris thing, but you know, he was avoided by a lot of fighters as well, but he was still fighting individuals. He was still staying active. Gary Russell Jr., I do kind of question whether or not he is actually comfortable only fighting once a year and using the fact that other champions don't want to fight him kind of more as an excuse, you know, to continue to do what he's comfortable doing. Like I said, extremely talented fighter, extremely skilled fighter. May very well be the best at that weight. But he's got to get more active. If he wants individuals to take him more seriously, or he wants to place himself into position to fight some of these big fights, then he's going to have to stay active. You know, if not the champ, go after number one. If not number one, number two. You're going to have to climb that ladder. You're going to have to do what some of these guys in the past have had to do. And that is a long way around. But if you do want to shoot for greatness, for true greatness, then those are the things that are going to be necessary. The only question now is, are you willing to do it? You know, now one way or another, he's going to be a good fighter. The only question is, at the end of his career, will that be the case?